Okay, so this is the video on the instructions for the acid and base virtual lab and the pH scale virtual lab. And you should have these handouts to go along with it. Now, you won't have to actually go to the virtual labs. There are already two links in the Schoology for you to click, but you might have to click, make sure that you're following directions and you're on the right virtual lab, because it's going to go from like at the acid and base one to the pH scale, back to the acid and base, back to the pH. Now, this first handout is for the acid and base one. You're just going to follow directions. Make sure you choose introduction. It's going to drag the pH meter in the solution, click on solvent, and you're going to circle the species that has the most copies in the magnifying glass. So when you set the first part, you're going to go by for water there, and you can click on solvent. And to look at this, you have different tools. Now if I click off graph and I have molecules that have solvent, it's going to show the particles, and it's going to show the gray particles are the solvent. The red, or kind of the orangish and blue ones, are the hydronium ions that are formed. And you want to look at, you can click on water. If you have a pH thing, you just lower it and it tells you the pH of each thing. If I click on strong acid, it gives me the pH 2.0, weak acid 4.50, and so forth. That's the pH tool. It's down there in the tools thing. And it's going to ask you about particles, about drawing those at different things, and you'll just draw and count up, what's the most abundant particle in there, and if it's the H3O plus, that would be the orange ones. You just count those up, and that's like the second part there. So I'm going to ask you to use litmus paper. So I changed, this is the litmus paper, it's under tools. If I drop it down into a solution like a weak acid, it turns orange, and then I can drag it over here and compare it to figure out what the pH is according to the litmus paper. Now, when you get down to here, it's going to tell you to uncheck the solvents box, like a number 2 here, fill in the magnifying glasses, reaction equations, and pH ions for each box with the given radio buttons clicked. So first you want to do it for a strong acid. So if you did that, you have a strong acid, and it brings up this, you can check the pH of it with your litmus paper and figure out what the pH of it is. Your equation down there you want to write down is what's underneath that. The HA plus H2O produces, your arrow there, A minus plus H3O plus. That's your equation. And this changes, if you have a weak acid, this is going to change. pH is going to change. See, it's the way you fill in that chart there. Alright, so after that, you're going to go to the pH lab for the second page, and you're going to fill in this color key here. And when you go to the pH lab, it looks like this right here. If you select micro, and it wants you to figure out, and you can, if you have, like, say we change this to water, and you fill it up, and you check it's going to tell you the pH is 7.0. If you drain all that out, and you got to drag this thing over there to test the pH. If I wanted to put drain cleaner in there, it tells me the pH is 13.00. But look what happens if I add water to that. The pH goes down, because water, will make it go more towards neutral if you have a base. And what that's called is dilution. When you dilute something, you add water to it, and it's going to make the acidity go higher towards neutral. It's going to make, if it's basic, it's going to make the pH go down more towards 7 or neutral. And the second part of this says to set the solution to a strong acid, put the pH meter in the solution, move the slider to each concentration, record the pH. Alright, so in this case, you're going to select My Solution at the bottom when you get to this right here, and it says to set the solution to a strong acid. So if you set it to a strong acid, if you want it to be, and that shouldn't be, I think that's back on the second page where it's got, if you notice, I was making a mistake there. The first top part is for, it is still on the acid and base one. It's not going to the pH one. I was mistaken. All this is for, well, it might go to the pH one at the top, but the bottom is going to be for the acid and bases. So I got to go back to it. And this is the acid and bases. It says to set to a strong acid. You want to, then you want to put on the, off of the solvent, and you want to do the My Solution. Okay, here we go. And you have concentration here. You want to put it to an acid first, into a strong acid. You want to do your concentration at 0.001, and you want to check the pH, your pH meter. I want to select it and drop it down. It gives you 3.0. Then at another concentration, you can move the concentration up. It'd be 1.99. Move it up to 0.1. It would give you 1.05 and so forth. So that's how you do that part right there. So you're just following directions. And it's probably the same thing at the top there that you can use that acid and base, but you have to go to pH. You'll be able to figure that out. Now, my next page, you're going to the pH scale FET simulator. You're going to just follow directions. They are really straightforward. And like I said, number 6, that's process which you add water to solution. That is called dilution. And then when you get here, you're going back to the acid and base virtual lab to fill this out. And when it asks you for the concentration of it, when it says under views, choose the graph thing. So we do the acid and base for a graph. It gives you the concentration of, this is a strong acid. The concentration would be in blue there on that graph, 1.0 times 10 to the negative 2. The concentration of the H3O plus would be 1.00 times 10 to the negative 2 also. If you had a weak acid, those numbers would change. So you're just following the directions though, but that's what it means. So it's pretty straightforward right there. And then this last page, I think you just follow the directions. You're going to be using the light bulb to test the electricity, if it conducts electricity or not. So this is pretty straightforward. Just read the directions carefully, help one another out, and you'll be able to figure this out easily.